And we are here with another edition number 4. So this is almost like an anniversary.
It's getting there.
Should I get you like a paper gift of some sort?
This is kind of a month thing or something like that. I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think the kids celebrate 4 weeks. Last week we got some good feedback on the offering up chapters in the memo section with time codes, so we're going to do that again. We have 3 chapters today. Chapter 1 is this really disturbing Web Meltdown story that now seems to be kind of catching fire. Chapter 2 is a look back at the Jupiter, the rocket ship that was Jupiter, and we've got that great video, really awesome.
Oh yeah, that's what you decided to go with. You're the boss.
Yeah, for sure. And and then segment 3, we're going to try and really get into the weeds on the Fox thing and understand what's for sale, who the buyers are, how much of it is politics. There's there's a bunch of different sales going on that are a little head-scratchingly complicated. But let's begin with this digital meltdown. So, you have the benefit of kind of a broader view than maybe I do. Is this just the standard thing people say whenever there's a couple of not great exits?
I think the answer is yes. I think it's also true that it remains extremely difficult in the web journalistic content business, and maybe even more so in the web journalistic content business to business sector, to make a go of it if you're not any more diverse than advertising in your revenue model. You can do great work, and it's just so hard, especially as we have queued up companies like a Mashable or what's the not Vice, but the other one that's B2B that has technology and stuff. These guys, if they don't have a conference business, if they don't have a research or a consulting, it's very, very hard. Not that those are even great businesses, but that's the way I think it shapes up.
So Fast Company kind of pieced it together, and they listed Mashable, Oath, Vice, and BuzzFeed as kind of the 4, apocalypse warning signs. Mashable's maybe the one we should do first because,
sure,
been around a long time.
And it's easier.
Had a really big footprint.
Yeah.
Seemed like they were going to sell. Looked like it was going to be $250 million, which would have been a good exit. They had about 40 million in. So, not quite a 4x, a 10x, but a meaningful exit. And then something happened. CNN, Turner put some money in, but everyone thought it was an acquisition. It kind of got them off the market. Yep. And now they're selling to Ziff Davis for $50 million, give or take.
And Ziff Davis, by the way, historically kind of has become very second tier itself and has tended to gobble things up for them to kind of disappear. So that's a very grim sign. And, when Om Malik wasn't able to make a go of it, and that made some news a couple years ago, and everyone was so surprised. It did good work, and, Giga Om was the site. Mashable, and we both love Pete Cashmore. He's great. I really think they do. If anything, they got too general. The idea that they were wonky on social was like a really great cut on things, but it's so hard to kind of stay with these things. I find it hard to believe 250 million was ever a real figure. I just don't know, Steve. What these are just to me, it's obvious that somebody like them was going to have a hard time to make a go of it.
So I have a kind of an overarching thesis about what's going on. And I think like in the background, there is this clash of titans. And on one hand, you've got Madison Avenue saying, we have all the money, all the big brand money, and we know where we want to put it, and we want lots of eyeballs. We want television. We want great big audiences of safe, clean, well-lit, targeted demographically. And then you've got the internet, which is like this splinter of a gazillion little niches, and the audience is saying, we like Mashable better when it was more about a thing. We like it better when it was narrower and nichier. And advertising saying, yeah, that doesn't work for us. Let us know when you've got like 10x the audience that you currently do.
Yes, yeah. And it's apples and oranges too, because some of these very players that we're talking about are doing perfectly fine next to print, word-based news organizations, even traditional ones, magazines, newspapers, other than the very big ones. But if you put it in the context of video, or you put it in the context of television, as much as we know there's displacement, one modest television hit is bigger than some of these companies, and so it becomes very difficult. I think, to me, BuzzFeed is a game-changing business, and if they can write the expectations in their world, they should be fine, because they're doing an incredible job of creating both original content and great curation, video and text, and they basically have cracked the code on distribution. Their stuff gets out there, but I think, as we've talked about in other episodes, the world only knows how to see them through a traditional prism, and so on their site, the advertising numbers disappointed. But that's the nature of the beast, because their presence is happening out in places where they haven't been able to sort of get a formula and an understanding and to monetize. But that being said, people would be wise to understand their model is somewhat the future model. And Vice is a great video production company, but you kind of have to look at them next to a bunch of video production companies that aren't like a network.
So here's the thing I think that makes this all fundamentally unfair. Television on paper delivers 12 minutes of ads a half hour, 12 ad units a half hour. But the dirty secret of television is what you and I know. Shh, don't tell anybody this. No one watches the ads. Everyone skips them. Right? But like TV, everybody's like, oh, that's the coin of the realm. We're good. People have DVRs. They all fast forward. We're going to count every one of those videos on a CPM basis as a legitimate revenue opportunity. Then you get to the web and they go, yeah, but for you guys, we're going to do viewability and it has to be above the fold, and we're going to like this. It's just, there's not a fair comparison between.
It's colossally unfair. And the only footnote I would add to television is don't forget the carriage fees and the must carry aspects that add insane amounts of what sounds like incremental revenue. Those guys would not be in the same shape if they did not have that. And it's a little like the ISP business, where 10 years later we don't even know a person who had AOL ISP still, and yet that had a lag and an overhang that still provided revenue and recurring revenue to them. As we did our cord cutting session last week or 2 weeks ago. These are dramatic changes that are going to happen in a very latent way, and this is going to play right into our next thing, because Fox, the future of what a cable channel, hegemony is going to be able to call its business is totally up in the air.
So last little bit of this, the sky is falling. There seems to be this, the elixir of the moment seems to be, I know how we'll solve this. We'll pivot to video. And Columbia Journalism Review has a fairly scathing, sharply worded article about the secret costs of pivoting to video. Again, because if pivot to video means turning websites into television networks, the unspoken offer there is mass media, which just isn't gonna happen.
Yeah, no, I think I agree completely, and we've mentioned it before, but I do think in some ways podcasts are a better bridge, because you have your beautiful written word, and you have not necessarily ready for FaceTime writers, and it translates reasonably well to just economically and efficiently get those going. But I am a believer in video. They just have to find the path, and they can't do video and drop the other stuff. So the formula it's very fraught, and there's a big difference between looking at the folding of these things in general for content businesses and as a piece of the future of news and journalism, because you got to have a formula, and you got to have a team, and you got to also curate and do other kinds of things really well too. Data is theoretically part of their business.
Just to give CJR their due, they have this really scathing 4-point pivot to video strategy. They say, number 1, lay off most of your writers who produce the stories fast and cheap. Number 2, produce videos, most of which are expensive, time-consuming, and which find an audience only on other platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Number 3, and then there's just a string of question marks. Number 4, profit. And I'm like, oh, man.
Oh, that's not. They're really so good too, but that's not very helpful.
Well, I mean, what they're saying is, when people say pivot to video, there is this business model question that seems to be a little blurry around if your video plays are all on Facebook and Facebook's not giving you any money, like that's gonna anyway. So moving on, okay. Chapter 2, which promises to be an enormous amount of fun. We're going to get in the time machine, which we're going to get in from time to time, and go back to, well, you tell me, what is the year?
Yeah, so, and I think in some ways, let me just introduce this by saying, would not have thought of doing this right now or this early, except something happened in the last 2 weeks where a couple of people from Jupiter who used to work there in the 90s with me and 300 other people wanted to do a reunion, holiday reunion. So a bunch of us got together, and it just this somewhat has come out of some of the emotions and facts that came out of that. But the short version of this is that Jupiter, more or less, I don't know if you have that 1995 Cyber 60 cover of New York Magazine, but even though Jupiter started earlier, let's say 1990, the real meat of the matter is about 95 to 2000. 95 being the marker when the online services and the web both started to grow tremendously. There was a business and investment opportunity that became gigantic, not just because of all the startups, but in some ways because of the combination of AOL and Netscape's becoming darlings of NASDAQ, and then that led to a wave underneath it. And Jupiter was just a kind of semi-sleepy but progressive cover of advanced technologies for consumers. And, we quickly added dozens and dozens of analysts, got a small investment from Gartner Group, who some of you may or may not be familiar with. That was a Just Add Water sales force where suddenly we had the biggest and most important companies in the world all paying us $50,000 a year for subscription access to our information, content, research, conference tickets. Not necessarily a sustainable model because of the nature of the content. But when we went for our IPO, because we raced to almost $100 million in revenue, the business model was pretty spectacular. It's diverse. It had 80%, yes, for only 2 years, recurring. But I'm kind of talking too much about that. What's important is that that was a very special time, and who I was with, about 40 of us a couple nights ago, to a person, and some of these are unbelievably accomplished. They've gone on to become CEOs and founders or co-founders of huge, significant internet companies. But everyone talks about how that time and that place and that company still retains something very special. And I really think it doesn't have as much to do with Jupiter as the age we were, New York City, the 90s, which was a particularly interesting time, and the internet bubble. And the fact that the market crashed and then 9/11 happened in very quick succession really, really put a punctuation mark on it that leaves us all kind of feeling like all that stuff was related, and it was really almost a perfect storm more than anything.
Well, let me ask a question about Jupiter. We're playing the video as we talk. Was it really just that everyone was so desperate for anybody who knew what the hell was going on, and you guys raised your hand and said, look, we can answer some of it. Like, it seems like there was this desperate need for wisdom, and like there were a couple of other consultancies, but there was more work than there were, hours in the day.
Yeah. No, well, I think the simple answer is at the outset, yes. I think I said in a past episode earlier, in the early 90s, we would be going into the C-level offices at major media companies, and I remember sitting with Lou Dobbs and his team at CNN, sharing Scotch on the Rocks with him while we showed him how to go on the internet one night at 7 o'clock in the CNN offices. At first, it was showing people what it was and what was going on, and in as much as there was Gartner and Forrester and others out there, they were not focused on this. And so we were just the only ones who happened to be tracking it when it was a very finite thing. We were the first people to track online ads, and there were so few of them at the time that we would count them manually. It's absurd. So we were smart and opportunistic to quickly become a very robust and credible information gathering organization and an event producing and a publisher, and we were digital and very rapidly. And so we got really good. We knew in 1996 or so we have to get our footprint was bigger than our foot, we always used to say, and we have to rapidly move to be worth what the attention was that we were getting. And we were all convinced internally by 97 or 98 that we were doing a great job at that, but it was a very fleeting moment.
Is there anybody today that's taken up that mantle?
Well, I would say some have gone beyond it. The one wrinkle that maybe was a mistake by us, but the currency of the realm then was in helping companies, mainstream big companies, manage, understand what to build, understand how to operate, understand whether their shirt was going to be eaten by Amazon or someone else. And so it was business strategy and intelligence and ideas and how-tos. Very rapidly, and even at the end of that, investment opportunities and the startup universe quickly displaced that in terms of the size of the business information and event and everything else opportunity around that. The only one that was doing that early on, ironically, was the Silicon Alley Reporter, which was a little rough scrabble startup led by Jason Calacanis, who was then in New York, who did great. Their thing was follow the money. And they were very smart about it, except then the bubble came and there was no way they were going to survive. But ever since then, it's been about that. So when you variously look at TechCrunch, as good as anyone, on the currency of the realm, which is how are the startups doing, where are the investments happening, a little bit about they've introduced new products and what do those products do, but it was really about that. So then you had have somebody like AngelList, and then if you look at a lot of the other guys, it's been about what's happening that's new, especially as it relates to startup. People just don't care. Barely do they care what the Washington Post is doing right now, except insofar as Bezos is running it and owns it, But you've got a lot of innovations that are happening inside big companies, but it isn't as interesting to people anymore.
So, at the risk of asking a question you're not going to answer, there's the Jupiter legend, and then there's the kooky Jupiter story.
Yeah.
And our mutual friend who had a personality that included a clown and a movie that was made and all kind do you separate those two, or?
Well, look, we could talk about this a lot, and I can't remember whether we've mentioned before, but if anyone has never seen Andy Timoner's documentary, which won Sundance in I guess 2008 or so, We Live in Public. It's an extraordinary movie, documentary about that time, and it's about my erstwhile business partner, Josh Harris. In around 93 or 94, a line was made, and Josh left to go do the stuff that became Pseudo and made him the in a much, much, much smaller order of magnitude, the kind of Warhol of the .com era in New York, which is not fair to Warhol, probably nor to Josh. But but other than a very brief period where they decided to call themselves Jupiter Interactive, there was no connection. Josh wandered into the party we had the day we had our IPO, and even though he made more cash off it than anyone else at the time, he had nothing. He didn't even know who these people were. So, but we were all in a very small, tight-knit neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else, and there was some craziness. And when you first started saying this question, I thought where you were going was, if Jupiter had itself a zany reputation, it was that we just provided these wild-eyed statistics and numbers and got attention because of that. And unlike today where it's all about investment in Series A and exit, back then it was all about IPO. So many premature IPOs. And if you've ever looked at an S1, which until 2 months before my IPO I had never knew about, you have to substantiate that with third-party data. And so people just used our stuff. We didn't even realize when we were creating that data that that's what it was being used for. So.
All right, so before we get to chapter 3, which is going to be frothy, let's do a real quick something you're loving, something you're hating.
Sure. Why don't you go first? Because I think you
all right.
stole a lot of
so mine are easy. I'll do loving first. There's a new, I think, little reviewed Apple app called Clips.
Oh.
It only really works well, or it works better if you have an iPhone 10, because it has all of these three-dimensional worlds you can record videos in. And I really like it. And it's got a voice-to-text thing that's pretty snazzy. It's built for the phone, so there's no real way to do editing on anything other than your phone, but I really like it. On the thing that I'm hating, I'm really reaching kind of maximum news overload. And I was at a conference the other day. I won't tell you the name of it because it was theoretically off the record. And somebody said on the stage, well, news is really entertaining these days. And I thought to myself, well, he doesn't really mean that. And then he went on and talked about something else. And he came back to this kind of wide-eyed, news is entertaining. The second time, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I thought, God, that just pisses me off. There's nothing entertaining about, like, the fact that I feel like I have to check my phone in the middle of the night to see if, we've started World War III. So news overload pisses me off. Clips app, thumbs up.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you about that news thing, because I think it's like following tragedies. The fact that we're compelled and can't get enough of it does not necessarily mean it's entertaining, at least in a positive way. So I agree with you. So mine are. I'll start with what I love. Guys, I like to spend more time on what I hate. I don't think enough credit has been given to the read later apps. And people have their own favorites. I have just been a devotee for close to 4 years now of Instapaper. Now, these things, they're hardly businesses, and I know a lot of them are either barely attachments to other businesses or never know if they're going to survive. And, we know about newsreaders and RSS feeds, and they get a little bit lost. But what I like about my favorite, Instapaper, is with almost no work, because iOS does a lot of it for you, which is to set up the connections to Instapaper. I roam through Twitter, I roam through websites, and all I have to do is hit a little button, and I just push things I want to read later. Anything that's more than 30-second read, I push and push and push into a big feed, which and then almost every night I'll check it out. And nothing I love more than that it has a nighttime view, so I can read it in bed without driving my wife crazy. But it's really terrific, and I feel like, for me, I get to mitigate this real-time culture and all the nightmare of our flitting brains that we talk about, how the internet is so terrible. I find more great long pieces to read through the internet and through an app like Instapaper. So,
you know what? I tried it years ago, but based on this recommendation, I'm going to give it another try.
Yeah.
All right.
It's all about
what are we hating on this week?
Yeah. So what I'm hating, ironically, are almost all my other feeds. it started with Facebook, but it's become a little bit, I don't know, where with somebody like Facebook, even if they do something bad, people are imitating them, or I'm not sure what. This idea of deciding for me what should be in my feed. I spend so much time over the years deciding who I'm going to be friends with and who I'm going to follow, who I'm going to unfriend. Not that I'm not friendly, but for whatever reason. And then Facebook, every single time I now go on Facebook, I go to the click and click most recent because I just want to see the people that I'm following in order. I don't want to re-see someone who I've clicked on before. It's bad faith that they're changing the order of what your feed is. And if anybody spends any time, Instagram's my all-time favorite app practically, but something really weird is starting to happen. If you go to Instagram and you hit reload on the top of your feed, it just changes. You see old stuff, you see new stuff. I'm suspicious. I think it all has to do with money. I think this is about their way of manipulating the system in a way that somehow puts you in a position to be more marketable to advertisers or to put stuff in front of you. I'm not really sure what it exactly is, but I've noticed it recently on Twitter too a little bit. Now, Twitter does a little different thing where they'll show you like news stories and would you like to see these ads and stuff, but damn it, my feed is so sacred to me.
So in the olden days, when we had this thing, you'll remember from way, way back called cable.
Yeah.
And they would send you 1,000 channels through a wire. And you'd be like, I don't need 1,000 channels. I want 6. I know which ones I want. I want the networks and I want this and I want this. Like, the fact that they didn't give you an ability to turn that 1,000 channels into a program guide of that wasn't so that was their kind of old-fashioned sloppy way of doing what Facebook's doing now, which is saying, no, we want to be able to tell people that this channel called whatever blah 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 has X thousand homes, million homes passed, meaning no one's watching them.
Yeah. I think there's some dumbness going on too, which is to say, if I click on, my father. I have relatives who never post on Facebook, but when they post, I want to see it. So just because I'm not clicking on their stuff regularly doesn't mean I shouldn't see their stuff. In fact, the opposite happens. The people that are just social diarrhea, I can't help. I try to not click on anything by them now, because if you do, you're just going to get them over and over again. And suddenly you're following them. I'm not aware of ever having followed anyone on Facebook, but somehow I'm following people and brands.
All right, last thing, last chapter 3, and this is an important one. Let's talk about what's happening with Fox.
Yep.
So the media is reporting this, I think, sloppily. Mm-hmm. Fox is for sale was the headline that started bouncing around. Fox is not for sale. There is some kind of a complicated Murdoch divide and conquer, spin off a piece, sell a piece thing going on. And depending on who you read, it's 21st Century Fox. So it's not Fox News. It's not the Wall Street Journal.
Well, let's break it out. 21st Century Fox is the movies.
Right.
And what else?
So 20th Century Fox is the movie studio. And FX and National Geographic, and then what Variety is reporting is Fox's enormous portfolio of international channels. I don't know what that means,
right?
But it's not Fox News.
It's not Fox News Corp. And it's not News Corp, so it's not the Wall Street Journal or the newspapers. Right. And where does Sky B was maybe is part of 21st Century, or we don't know?
No, I don't know. It's a good. Actually, it's a very.
I think that what they're saying is so all over the place that is really the things that we can do, I think, is to sort of step back and understand what's really might be driving some of these things. One, Rupert is very old, and there has to be a very, very direct what happens next. Two, Rupert is the driver. To me, the wedge into all this is Wall Street Journal, Fox News, and the New York Post, whatever other assets they have that, the brothers theoretically, Lachlan and James are kind of like the the Ivanka of the Trumps, attached to all the bad stuff but somehow not connected to it. They're the ones that got the people fired who were the sex offenders and all the other stuff. But this is a big deal. Are they out there saying, I don't want to have any part of Fox News going forward, or I'm going to change it, or I'm going to be able to, the whole future of this, much less the future of a bunch of newspapers that are, is a big deal. Are they just trying to sell? Would it be true that 21st century, the movie and the pure entertainment things are the ones to get as much cash on now because this is a newspaper family or something like that? To me, these are the more interesting questions than the machinations of what's getting sold, because I don't understand any of what they're saying. Every story's a little different.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the question is, what do the sons want to run?
That's exactly.
Do they really? There's been drama about Fox News and Ailes getting fired, and whether or not they were going to, do they want to end up left with this hard right-wing politically active thing? That doesn't seem like where they've been historically.
No, it doesn't. But it is, they've been theoretically, ironically, they've been the adults in the room in running the company from the inside. But we all know what the soul of Rupert is, and where his and some of it sounds almost good on paper, like being a newspaper man and a journalist. And then there's all the stuff that's the hard right and the willing to do business with China, marrying a woman in order to be better positioned, all the stuff that makes him sound really bad. But we don't know what the character of these guys is, other than that they've put their foot down theoretically a few times against some of Rupert's more Rupert-like instincts. But none of that's changed anything. All the promises, it happened so fast with the Journal over 5 years. The promises that they weren't going to be changed, and then it just completely happened. So I don't really know what the future is, and. It's hard to know what the value is in these things, too.
I do think there'll be a transaction. That's what it smells like to me.
Yeah, but it's going to be the movie studio more than anything, right?
Yeah. We are out of time, my friend.
Exactly.
Our anniversary went well.
Yes.
I'll see you for the beginning of our second, what do we call it?
Month.
Have a great week.
Really good. Thanks,
right.
Steve.
See ya.